was a pretty ominous setup in Independence today at Cleveland Clinic Courts, where the Cavaliers held practice following their Game 1 loss to the Indiana Pacers. Spencer Davies and I here to break it down. I was on the scene, Spence, for Kenny Atkinson's very revealing press conference. And, among other things, he called out the officials for some of the bad calls last night, including the one on DeAndre Hunter, which he said after they went back and watched, felt like should have probably been called a foul even after it went to review, and it wasn't. He said there was a second one, and I thought he was going to point to the Jared Allen one, but he actually pointed to Evan Mobley and the closeout on him from Miles Turner that led to him sort of landing on his foot, twisting his ankle. And then that sort of set up the situation where he was expounding on the two injuries that those two guys have. For Hunter, it is a sprained thumb on his shooting hand. For Evan, it is an ankle injury. And both of them are listed as questionable or doubtful. I don't really know. I know the injury report is supposed to be coming out any minute now, so we'll have to see what that looks like. I think he kind of was trying to hint at them being questionable, but Spence, like even the fact that he mentioned the word doubtful after saying questionable at first sort of left me feeling like this is a pretty critical and I think ominous situation is the best word I can come up with.
Yeah, ominous is right. Definitely not happy with how that happened. The organization feels a certain way. You heard it from Kenny, first and foremost, just saying they're not a dirty team, but crossing the line physically is how they feel and how they put it.
Yeah.
Just being the messenger here. I can give you some updates on a few guys. So the first one is obviously Evan Mobley, the biggest one in this because of how they need to play 5 out against the Pacers. Well, it doesn't sound like he's moving very well, which isn't a good sign. Doesn't sound like he's going to be able to give it a go for game 2, just from what I've gathered. I think Donovan Mitchell will be able to give it a go, but again, hearing that he's just not right, dealing with a calf and ankle injury. So he's going to be pushing it and obviously playing some heavy minutes, but what percent are you getting out of Spida in this situation? And then you look at DeAndre Hunter, you said sprained thumb. I think dislocation is
sorry, it
what
was a
I heard.
dislocation, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so he was obviously injured on the play where Benedict Mathurin had a clean block, but also had a left hand on him as he was going up to get to the rim. And obviously Benedict after that was standing over him, and that was obviously a playoff type environment, so I wouldn't like call for a taunt or anything like that. But Mathurin also got DeAndre Hunter earlier in the game in the ribs in a situation where they did call a foul. So those three are obviously something that you have to keep an eye on. Darius Garland, we heard from Kenny last night talking about what good is it if he's 50 or 60% against this team. I agree with that sentiment because if you're playing the Pacers who are getting up and down the floor, he's going to be running a lot and obviously putting a lot of pressure on that toe. And just from who I've talked to, DG only knows how to play one way. He's shifty.
Yeah.
I almost equate it to a football injury. You know how many times we see like turf toe, right? And there's route running and there's planting and curl routes and all that. Darius Garland kind of plays a similar way. He's very stop-go. He's very keep you on your toes, move left, right. A lot of like similarities to like playing football. So I feel like that's why the toe injury has taken as long as it has. I know he's probably going to try to go through shoot around and go through warm up. I know he went through shoot around today at practice. Tomorrow he's probably going to try to give it a go during that pregame shoot around, but it wouldn't surprise me if DG was out. It wouldn't surprise me if Evan was out. And I thought that DeAndre Hunter would be okay to do it, but it also is a shooting hand that he screwed up his thumb. So there's a very good chance that 3 of those guys might not be able to give it a go. And, you have no Evan Mobley, then you're really changing your strategy. They're going to have to try and slow up this game. They're going to have to try and play a half-court game to where they are in control of the pace. Hopefully they're making their shots, but they're going to be digging deep into the bench too. They're going to have a ton of minutes for Dean Wade if they want to play 5 out. Isaac Okoro's role is going to really increase as a result of this, and I think you're going to even see some Javonte Green, which good thing they picked him up at the end of the year because they needed some depth, and it sounds like he's going to be playing.
Yeah, I obviously want to get into what we think the strategy looks like from here. We can talk about that here in a second, just a little bit more before we get out of here. But Spence, it was ominous enough when Kenny again used the word questionable and then doubtful in talking about the injuries. I think the fact that he you always get the sense that there's bad news coming when somebody uses like an eraser phrase. And when he started the entire conversation about the officiating and the injuries, he started it with, okay, I want to be clear here. Like, this is no disrespect to the Pacers and the way that they play and Coach Carlisle. And I don't think it's their problem. But, and that's where you kind of knew, like, okay, he means business. Like, he doesn't call it the officials very often. And so I think that was another sign that there was some bad news coming. And then the fact which you brought up, like they usually hold the media availability on the court at the practice facility, and they didn't do that today. It was in the little media room attached to the court, and because of that, you sort of said to me in a text, you were like, "Yeah, the fact that they did it in there, they didn't want us to see anything. They didn't want us to see anybody out there in the court." And so all three of those things kind of added up to, for me, a big red flag as I was driving home from the facility, where I was like, "Yeah, this does not sound good." And you're sort of giving the indication here that it sounds like it's going to be tough for any of those three guys that are banged up right now to play tomorrow night. You alluded a little bit going into the bench and doing some different things. How do the Cavs now slow things? And also, I'll say this: I wasn't expecting them to practice today at all. The fact that they did also sort of told me, okay, that's not a good sign, because if they're trying to change their game plan entirely, they probably needed a practice under their belts to kind of talk about, like, hey, here's what we're going to have to do. Let's get a sense of where guys are at injury wise. And if we're going to change things up, we need to kind of walk through this at least a little bit and get a sense of what it's going to look like. So what will it look like, you think, from your perspective?
Well, they're, like I said before, they're going to have to really slow things down, put it in the half court, try to have Indiana not play in that transition, control the pace, dictate the pace, as Sam Merrill said today at practice. And I think that's a big word for that, is dictating the pace, making sure that they're playing their game. And yeah, this is going to be a different style because they're not going to be playing quite as much five out. The Cavs are offensively, just because they are limited in what they can put out there. So they've got to take care of the basketball. They have to make shots. If they don't make shots tomorrow, it's going to be very, very hard to see them winning, especially with those weapons being down. You're going to have some really high usage and a lot of onus on Ty Jerome being a playmaker, but also being a primary scorer. You're going to need Max Strus to take probably 11, 12 shots. You're going to need Sam Merrill to make shots when he's in the half court and creating that kind of mismatch and off-ball stuff on the outside. Like, this is going to be tough. Like, Dean Wade is going to have to take shots in this situation too. Like, whenever he's in there playing a five-out lineup, because this is what you have left. And, hopefully you can get Jared Allen in the pick and roll, and then get him in the dunker spot here and there. We know how dominant JA can be when he is one of those guys that has to step up and score. Defensively, they had him out on an island a ton yesterday, just watching the film back. Tyrese Halliburton was picking on him. Andrew Nemhard was picking on him. And I thought J.A. held his own. But the thing is, like, these guys know how to create space for themselves, and that's what makes them so dangerous. But just listening to what Kenny had to say at practice today, it seems like a lot of their stuff, they need to be more playing with purpose. And they have to really understand. They said it's less about tactician stuff, and it's more about what their focus level is and their force, playing with force, their energy. Yep. So that's, you're going to have to bring it up a tick. Now you're on the opposite end of this. You know what Rick Carlisle said yesterday, saying that the Pacers are going to need 4 to 5% extra to beat the Cavs. Well, that's just now flip-flopped, because the Cavs are going to need their depth to shine through, and they're going to need the guys who are probably going to play some heavy minutes. And, Isaac Okoro is going to have to be stepping up as an offensive threat more here too. Like, not only just knocking down shots, but also just driving and secondary playmaking, using him in the small pick and roll. I could see the Cavs going with like Max Strus at the 4 in some situations, and having Dean at the 5. There's a ton of different ways they can go about this, but it sounds like DG's probably not going to be able to play. It sounds like Evan Mobley's probably not going to be able to play, and depending on DeAndre Hunter and that dislocated thumb on his shooting hand, whether he can give it a go. By all accounts, Donovan Mitchell, again, dealing with the calf and ankle injury that really no one's touched upon, but he's going to give it a go, and he is going to try and play through that, because Donovan knows what time of year it is, and a lot of it's going to be put on his back too. So it's going to be a different style offensively. They're going to have to adjust and adapt to this. But maybe this is also something they can throw a wrench in against Indiana, because Indiana had a pretty good game plan in game one, but seeing a completely different style, different scheme, different sets could change things up. And listen, if the Cavs can pull out game two tomorrow, they have 2.5, 3 days of rest before Friday to try and get right at least a couple of those guys and see if you can flip the momentum back in the Cavs' favor. But
Yeah.
really, really, really bad day in terms of news today.
Yeah, it's a good point in terms of like if you can at least even the series up, you got a couple of days off to get yourself right. Well, I'm sure that's the Cavs kind of thought process going into this one. What it looks like is going to be interesting. I'm glad you brought up Donovan because he's dealing with the calf issue too. We noticed last night he was hobbled. And so yeah, it's just unfortunate that this time of year again, the injury bug catches up with Cleveland after a year where they generally stayed relatively healthy. But your point on Rick Carlisle's comments yesterday, 4 to 5% more from some guys. That's what the Cavs need. Somebody like Ty Jerome, as you mentioned, is going to have to step up. Isaac Okoro is going to have to make some shots. Max Strus is going to have to make some shots. It's going to be an interesting sort of change to the way the Cavs do things and the way that they've done things all year. But we'll see how prepared they are for this challenge on the biggest stage here this time of year. And if they are, maybe they can, pull one out and get themselves situated in a better spot going into game three. So, guys, we just want to give you a quick update here. Some important intel from Spence. Be sure to head on over to the Cavaliers on SI YouTube channel, where some of you might be watching this right now. We have a bunch of content up there from it today, including Kenny's press conference. You can hear him use the questionable and doubtful designations and then say there's serious concern in terms of the guys being injured, and some of the other comments you have from today. Sam Merrill, and we'll get JA up there for you here shortly as well. But appreciate you guys stopping by. And as always, keep on following along with all things Cleveland Cavaliers with the Cleveland Cavaliers on SI.